Good evening and welcome. I'm just playing with the sound. Not sure which tapping sound I like better. But tonight we're going to be going over the history and geography of Cameroon. Cameroon's a very interesting country in my opinion. In terms of geography especially. So before we dive into that, just note that I do have an Instagram that you can follow and see some behind the scenes on. And also don't forget to subscribe because I am doing a lot of fun new things with my channel. Some of you, depending when I post this, either yesterday or the day before, saw that I'm starting to do live streams of video games. Right now I'm just doing The Sims and trying to recreate the entire British royal family lineage, a challenge that I've always wanted to do. But I'm also going to download some historical games, like historical city builder games, maybe Age of Empires, and play some cool history games with you guys. So I think it's going to be really fun. Also, I am going to highlight, I'm looking at my calendar, like a lot of countries this month. Ones that are very, very tiny, actually. There's only like a handful, I think 3 or 4 countries that are actually like big. The next country we're going to do after this is very, very small. They're really interesting countries that I think a lot of people haven't heard of, or if they've heard of them, don't know anything about. I know there's a country I'm doing next week that I know nothing about, so I'm excited to start researching that. So subscribe so you can learn in a nice, relaxing, calm way about the histories of some countries. But tonight we're going to do Cameroon. Let's start with its geography because it's so neat. After we go over the history, I'll show you some pictures in here so you can see some of these places that I'm talking about. Cameroon's nickname, or one of them is the Hinge of Africa because it's right in the corner of West Africa and Central Africa. The other one is Africa in miniature because it contains every type of climate, basically terrain, what have you, that you can find in Africa. Starting off with its borders, on this whole side of Cameroon we have Nigeria. Over here we have Chad and the Central African Republic. And down here we have Congo, Gabon is right there, and right here a little bitty border, Equatorial Guinea. Over here on its coastline, on the Gulf of Guinea in the Atlantic Ocean, it's part of a little waterway. You can't really see the writing on here. The Bight of Bonny, or the Bight of Biafra, depending on what source you read. And all along the coast here we have very swampy mangrove forests. Very, very thick and wet. All kinds of wildlife, as you can imagine. It's also where you can find the largest city in Cameroon. It's Douala, right there. Which you can see is right in this little bay here. And flowing out into the bay is one of the most important rivers in Cameroon. It's the Wuri River. It meets up from like many other rivers right here. But if you think about like African history, the little ports that Europeans started were places just like this, where you have a nice place to dock your ship and a river to get trade goods from. So that's why that area is very important. The rest of southern Cameroon has very thick tropical rainforest that you find all throughout Central Africa. Very, very humid and wet. It's actually one of the rainiest places in the world. You can imagine, full of all kinds of different exotic plants and animal life. A lot of it endemic to Cameroon, meaning you'll only find it in Cameroon. Over here we have the Cameroon mountain range. And right here, find the exact spot right there, is Mount Cameroon, the highest point in Cameroon, which is actually an active volcano. It last erupted in the year 2000, and there's a big volcanic chain all up in here in Cameroon, where it doesn't show it on this map, but there are pictures of it in here. There are volcanic lakes, so basically sort of like not crater lakes, but lakes that sit right on top of flowing magma. And if the conditions are right, if something disturbs that magma, like an earthquake, it can release a cloud of CO2 or carbon dioxide, and it suffocates anyone that is near it, which has tragically happened in Cameroon before. But yeah, active volcanoes all throughout this area. Also in this area, you find the capital city of Yaoundé, right there. A thriving big city in the middle of the rainforest here. If we move further north, we reach this area up here called the Adamawa Plateau, which is named for someone that you're going to hear in the history. It's where there are mountains in this region. There are lots of big mountain ranges down here on this side. Here we have see the light here. The Mandara Mountains go down here, and the Antika Mountains are over here, sort of creating a natural barrier between Nigeria and Cameroon, but we'll get into that in its history. The plateau region has that volcanic soil from the volcanic chain over here, so it's very good for farming, makes it super fertile. It has lots of grasslands, lots of rocky terrain. And up here in this oddly shaped area of Cameroon is the Savannah region. This region's very hot, very dry, gets very little rain, very poor for farming. And the most prominent geographic feature up here would be Lake Chad, which I just got to put this down so you can see. Lake Chad is right here, but all of this dotted area up here is where Lake Chad used to be, and of course it extends further past the page. 90% of Lake Chad has dried up due to many factors, mostly from irrigation. Climate change also exists. But most of Lake Chad today is in Cameroon. And let me check my notes. Did I get everything important? I believe so. Yeah, if anything else pops up that I think of, I'll mention it. But you can see all of the big national parks we have in Cameroon that have been established since, I believe it was like the 1980s when they started creating these national parks. Sorry. I just forgot what I was talking about. National parks to preserve the wildlife there, because there are lots of animals in Cameroon that are very endangered, like black rhinos, for instance, just off the top of my head, many others. So let's get right into its history. So people have been living, because this is Africa, people have been living in Cameroon since pretty much there have been people. The earliest tribe that we know of that lived in Cameroon were the Baka people, who used to be known as pygmies. That's sort of a derogatory term nowadays, especially after it got turned into like an insult, and a very questionable time in American history when in Central Park they put people from this tribe in their zoo exhibit. The big yikes. So they tend to go by their traditional name, the Baka tribe. The Bantu migration swept through here, so there's still a large Bantu-speaking population over here. And you know what? because I've been rehearsing this, I'm gonna get into some of the interesting tribal things when I go through this book, because there's lots of cool pictures and maps and things I can show you of where different tribes popped up in kingdoms, what have you. But the most important one to know about is the Sao culture, which lived up near Lake Chad. They barely tipped into what is now Cameroon. But their important thing was that they were an Islamic tribe, and I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll get into that in a second. Let's go chronologically so I don't skip around. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to come into contact, but the first time Cameroon is mentioned in any kind of recorded history were from the Carthaginians, who we know from my Tunisia video were up in what is now Tunisia. they had a very famous cartographer slash historian named Hanno, who sailed along the coast of Africa. This is me sailing along the coast of Africa. And he actually witnessed Mount Cameroon erupting and wrote about it in about 500 BCE. That's super cool. But yeah, the Portuguese were the first to arrive in 1472. They arrived, of course, over here and saw this river and noticed that it had a lot of shrimp in it, crayfish, crawdads, whatever you call them, wherever you're from. So they named it the Rio de Cameroes. I don't know Portuguese whatsoever. Cameroes. Okay, I got it now. The Rio de Cameroes, which basically means like the shrimp river. And Cameroes was eventually, as it made its way through different European languages, became Cameroon. So that's how the country got its name. They, of course, set up trade with the native population here, particularly the Douala people. And Christian missionaries came and built in this area. Eventually, the control went from the Portuguese to the Dutch, later from the Dutch to the English. Meanwhile, up here in the north, in the more Islamic tribes, where we now have the Fulani people, their leader, Adamawa, basically, I didn't write down his full name, launched an Islamic jihad and started sweeping down here to the south and established the Adamawa Emirate in this region. So it's still known by his name in this area. And to this day, the majority of northern Cameroon's very Islamic, the majority of southern Cameroon's very Christian. My cat's trying to jump off my lap. There he goes. Okay. But yeah, tribal leaders, even today, are still an important aspect of culture out in the rural areas of Cameroon. Many dynasties and lineages from ancient times are still preserved today. So, as I said, the English eventually came over to this area, but then the Germans came. They built their first warehouse on the river here, claiming their little territory, and then the Scramble for Africa happened, which was a conference in Germany where all the big European powers got together and divided up what parts of Africa they wanted to claim, and Germany wound up claiming this area, and it became the colony of Cameroon in 1884. It was originally just the coastal area, but then they started pushing further and further out. They eventually got up to Lake Chad. Of course, they were met with a lot of opposition from the tribes that lived in the area. But the Douala down here are the ones that the Germans negotiated with to get the colony started in the first place. So it was more like the further out they went, the more opposition they faced. In World War I, of course, like any German territory that's near any British or French territory, the British and French invaded Cameroon. The Germans here actually put up a big fight. They didn't manage to take it over until 1916, but take it over nonetheless they did. And when the League of Nations was formed, they decided to split the country between the British and the French. So the British wound up getting this territory and a big chunk of territory up here. It became northern Cameroons and southern Cameroons. The rest of the country became French Cameroon, which expanded because the French already controlled all these countries over here. So the territory got pushed further out once the French came into control. This happened in 1919. France basically made French Cameroon just like any other like important French territory, whereas the British made it more like, well, it was administered from Nigeria, so it kind of reminds me of like Puerto Rico to the United States. Like it's part of the United States, but it's not. So North and South Cameroons were part of Nigeria, but they weren't part of Nigeria. They were under Nigerian control, which was under control of the British. So French really blew up in this area. You know, the French culture really sank its claws in there. and is still there to this day. After World War II, skipping way ahead, the United Nations, once they formed, put the Cameroon territories into a trusteeship in 1946, which was their way of taking colonized areas and helping to push them toward independence. Britain decided to put their colonies up to a vote whether or not they would join Nigeria or not, and the northern one did, so that is now part of Nigeria. The French, though, were like, this is French Cameroon, it's, not going to change. They actually outlawed an independence political party that formed in 1995, known as the UCP, or Union of Cameroonian Peoples. They in turn waged a guerrilla war against the French, which led to independence, conveniently, on January 1st, 1960. Their president was named Amadou Ahidjo, the leader of the UCP party. And it was during this time that Britain put up to a vote whether southern Cameroons wanted to join Nigeria or the rest of Cameroon. They voted to join Cameroon, so that's why we have this chunk right here. That's part of Cameroon. But very important, this part of Cameroon is English-speaking primarily. English and French are both the official languages of Cameroon, but there's definitely a divide between this part that speaks English and the rest of it that speaks French, and we'll get into that in a minute. Eventually, how should I? So Cameroon, moved forward in terms of economy, farming, what have you. The Germans left a string of plantations around here, which, the people that they fought as they expanded when they lost wound up conveniently employed on these plantations. So it was very easy to kind of pick themselves up by the bootstraps and work toward a growing economy. It definitely helped that there's a lot of oil reserves in the area here. And President Ahidjo, like any democratic president, did a lot of good and did a lot of bad in terms of just like picking projects that wound up just losing the country money, things like that. But he eventually stepped down from the presidency in 1982. He claimed it was for his health. There's a lot of reasons why it could have been. I mean, it could have been for his health, but basically he wanted to step down from his position so that he could work from the shadows. He appointed his prime minister, Paul Biya, to be the president. And Paul Biya just took off running with that position. Let's see. I'll get ahead of myself here in this account. So Paul Biya is still president of Cameroon. And yes, you heard that right. He became president in 1982. To this day, in 2021, he's still president of Cameroon. He's considered to be extremely corrupt. He spends a lot of his time in France, just like hanging out, kind of running the country from a distance. Whenever he's reelected, he wins, even though, it's very clear that there's been election fraud. There's been times where, you reach a limit on the Constitution, how many times you can run, and he's just decided to change it so that he says it's because the people want him to stay president. But, I mean, come on now. Yeah, he's considered, in some cases, a dictator, in some cases, just an extremely corrupt politician. So Ahidjo, working from the shadows, was sort of upset with how Paul Biya took over his cabinet position, and there was a coup against Paul Biya in 1983, which failed. It was rumored to have been led by Ahidjo. Ahidjo spent the rest of his life in exile. And yeah, no one's tried to upset the government in that way, but a few have tried, mainly due in the 1990s when their economy started to fail, and some English-speaking people in this region decided to declare independence, and they created their own autonomous country called Ambazonia, or it's also called Ambaland, which of course Cameroon does not recognize. And they have been leading a sort of, political fight, guerrilla fight, almost civil war against the government of Cameroon to give them more rights and eventually to grant them independence, which obviously, as you can see on the map, hasn't happened yet. Another territorial dispute would be over this peninsula that you can barely see right here in the corner. My desk isn't big enough for this book, but it's this peninsula. It's the Bakassi Peninsula. And it was debated over whether it should be part of Nigeria or Cameroon. It does have oil, so there's a reason for both countries wanting it. And it had a lot to do with the history of, it was German occupied, so it should belong to Cameroon. But, the British took over that area, so it should belong to Nigeria because Nigeria was controlled by the British. It went back and forth until 2006, when Paul Biya got together with the president of Nigeria and Kofi Annan at the United Nations, and they worked it out, and they agreed it should be part of Cameroon. Many people living on this peninsula were very upset by that and fought back. There was a big insurgency that was squashed pretty quickly and stretched on until around 2009 or so. In 2014, because, as I said, Cameroon borders Nigeria, Paul Biya and his government officially declared war on the terrorist organization Boko Haram. This was when not only was Boko Haram becoming more and more powerful, but they had attacked a girls' school and kidnapped all the girls in it. Very tragic world event that really shook everybody in the world. So they, started fighting back, entering Nigeria to fight the terrorists. Terrorists came into Cameroon to fight back. It went back and forth until Paul Biya officially declared Boko Haram beaten in 2018. Of course, it still exists, but in his eyes, their operations were a success. In 2016 is when the Anglophone protests and riots started. So, as we said over here, this area is very, very English speaking. The rest is very, very French speaking, to the point where some had, declared their own territory, tried to declare independence. It was around this time in history that more and more people were saying that there was huge discrimination against English speakers, and it turned out that Paul Biya did confess a few years later, I think 2019, I want to say, that he was indeed trying to suppress English speaking in this region and trying to force French language and culture on these people, which only made things worse. They protested, the government fought back against the protesters. That never leads to anything good. In this case, it led to a guerrilla war, particularly for the people of Ambazonia or Ambaland. Terrorist attacks are still happening through this day. The last ones happened in 2020. The organization, apparently, once lockdown happened, they said, we are locking down as well, but some factions are still fighting to prevent the spread of COVID-19. But it still is an ongoing issue. It's also led Boko Haram to re-enter the country due to all the instability. So that's basically where Cameroon is today. It's, overall, it's a very beautiful country. The people seem very lovely. It's one of those countries where the only problem is with the government. And if they had the right leadership, this would be a fantastic country, in my opinion. Cameroon's really beautiful. Let me show you in the book. I try not to put too much of my opinions in these videos, but it just comes out. First of all, check out this cover. These are elephant masks. So fantastic. I love it. I might have Topple over here for that reason. Topple's my little elephant, who, if you're a long-time viewer of my channel, it's been a minute since Topple's been here. He has really fantastic ears, which, let me put him up against the mic. Rub his ears like this. Makes that sound. I just thought he should be on the channel again because it's been a minute since we've seen Tapu. Let me show you some pictures of Cameroon. Africa in miniature, like I told you. Here are some boys from the Mbunti tribe out on a hunt in the rainforest. So when I talk about rainforest, this is what I'm talking about. Thick, lush jungle. So beautiful. Look at that. Oh, that's gorgeous. I love it. This is a Fulani man. Like I said, the Fulani are very Islamic culture and peoples. It says he's a holy man. That's typically their style of dress. Got a woman holding the Cameroonian flag. Here's a political map of Cameroon. You can see lots and lots of cities and towns, what have you. Here's some of the northern area. This is the Mandara Mountains. So you can see the cactuses, the big rocks, and some fishing boats on the coast. Here's a physical map so I can show you. You can see Mount Cameroon there, all the mountains stretching up there, rainforest area, the southern plateau, the Adamawa Plateau, some of the big lakes that have formed from dams, right there, and then this is Lake Nyos, which you're going to see, I think, on the next page. So let me talk about it then. The coast and the mangrove swamps, big old swampy trees. I hope it's on the next page then. Picture from the Cameroon mountain range, which you can see a little village right there. Isn't that cool? And some of the grassland area. Very gorgeous. This is Lake Nyos. So under this lake is magma, which this photo here shows them trying to release some of the like gas and water from under the lake so that there are no other explosions, CO2 explosions that happen. It says here that 1,700 people passed away as they slept, suffocated. Isn't that horrible? It's just another one happened at Lake Monun, that killed about 40 people. Such a horrible way to go. This is on a palm oil plantation, I should say, and some sheepies. There's always sheep. There's either sheep, what else? There's always sheep. If it's a European country or affected by the Holocaust in any way, there's always a picture of Hitler. And then there's always but what is Islam if it's a majority Islamic country? I didn't say it before, but Cameroon is a majority Catholic country, but Islam is not far behind it. Flooded area. It's flooded out the road. You can see this car trying to pass through. Here is Douala, the largest city in Cameroon. And this is a picture of Bafoussam, which looks like a beautiful city, doesn't it? Look at the city square here. A big old giraffe. So here, there's Bafoussam, by the way, that I just showed you. All of the vegetation and national parks. So you can see the forest area, plateau region, and then it gets deserty up there. The savannah. Some birds. We have got a kingfisher and some big old storks. And another good picture of just how dense this rainforest is. Gosh, I can't imagine what the humidity must feel like. There's some elephants, my favorite. Aren't they sweet? Right, Tapu? Yeah, they're very sweet. And some gorillas. There's one species of gorilla you can only find in Cameroon. I think it's the Cross River gorilla. I always mean to look up how to pronounce these. It's a type of antelope. I believe it's a diker or deeker. I don't know. I've never actually bothered to look up how to pronounce those. They don't really come up in everyday language. And here is a red colobus monkey. here we've got a tsetse fly. So these are very dangerous. It's one of the reasons why most of Cameroon wasn't as colonized until the Germans took control. It's because these flies carry a virus, I believe, that causes sleeping sickness. So basically you become so unwell that you fall asleep and eventually become brain dead, which, you know, leads to death. So these are very dangerous insects. There's a big chompy. There's a hippo, the babies, and a black rhino. Oh, a cool illustration here, but not as cool as this one. So this is a drawing based on Hanno's descriptions of his voyage around West Africa. Isn't that neat? Very nice monkeys there. So here we go. This is what I wanted to show you before. Let me get pencil again. Northern Africa until 1500. So we can see the big Mali Empire here. Definitely the most powerful, biggest empire at the time. There's the Akan states that I mentioned in my Ghana video. And then up here we can see that this empire barely tipped into Cameroon. They were the Kanema Bornu Empire, which, like I said, was an Islamic tribe, empire, kingdom, with Islam being brought over by traders from the north. And here's a more detailed look at the African kingdoms that existed. You can see the Fulani were by far the most powerful up in the north. Doualas down here did most of the trading with all the Europeans. And there's also the Bamileke and Bamoun tribes. Let's see. This is a shrine, I believe, yeah, ancient shrine in the north for the Fulani people. And this is the Bamoun Royal Palace, because like I said, all of those tribal lineages are still intact today. And here is a statue of the king, the first king, no, rephrase that, the king that converted to Islam, the first Islamic king, that's what I meant to say, of the Bamoun people. There's some Portuguese sailing up to Africa. And look at this guy. Look at this dude who looks like a clown, but he is kidnapping slaves to sell. And here we can see a good map of German Cameroon when it was at its peak. And then once the French invaded the territory that they tacked on, this belonged to Spain. We'll get into that eventually. It's a really interesting history. This is the Berlin Conference, also known as the Scramble for Africa. This guy I didn't mention in history, Gustav Nachtigal. There's a dam, the Nachtigal Dam, on the main river over here, but I'm not sure if it's on this map anyway. So he negotiated with the Douala chiefs, it says it right there, to allow the Germans to take over the land, and he used that to, how do I say it, to give Germans the right to claim Cameroon as their territory. And Germany did a lot of infrastructure in Cameroon, such as building railroads and roads, bridges, things like that, but at the expense of the people who lived there. People were hired to do these construction projects, and if they resisted, then they wound up on like the more major plantations. These are some, let's see, it doesn't say what soldiers they are, but it's during World War I. Soldiers ready for battle. Do we have another map? So here we go. The northern, there you go. The northern Cameroon's up here, controlled by the British. And southern Cameroon's controlled by the British, and everything else became French Cameroon. So these are the regions that became part of Nigeria. This is the region that became part of an independent Cameroon. This is Amadou Ahidjo. I almost knocked over my water. Amadou Hijo right there. And a modern day map of Cameroon. Yeah, you can see all the different territories around there. And you can see the southwest region is the one that is getting the real brunt of the whole Anglophone discrimination. And that's where Ambazania is located. Here we can see Kofi Annan, of course, and Paul Biya and the president of Nigeria, Olusegun Obasanjo. I'll know how to pronounce his name once I get to Nigeria, but you know that the UN has helped a lot of peaceful negotiations, and due to that, Cameroon really has good relations with their neighbors. Not a lot of contention there anymore. Carrying the flag, and here is their flag. So, from left to right, Cameroon's national flag has 3 equal vertical bands of color: green, red, and yellow. Each color stands for one of Cameroon's major geographic areas: green for the rainforest, red for the soil of the savanna, and yellow for the dry northern land. The yellow star in the center of the red band represents the unity of the Republic of Cameroon. It's a nice flag. It's like the one flag where the red doesn't represent blood, you know. The presidential palace, and here is Amadou Hijo and Paul Biya, the only 2 rulers of independent Cameroon that has ever been. Literally, like, he's the longest, person to hold political office who isn't a member of some royalty, because he's been in political power since 1975 when he was prime minister and then president. Here's the capital city of Yaoundé. Another one of the big infrastructure projects when the Germans took over was that they established this town to be a trading post, and it became the capital city. Let's see. This is a government official addresses a crowd in northern Cameroon. And here is a tribal king, king of the Pana tribe, Happy the Fourth. Cameroon's one of those countries where the further out you get from the major cities, the more loose the politics get and more the control of the tribal leaders. Here's Jacques Chirac. Ew. Man, so if someone was like, can you sum up Jacques Chirac in one picture? Here it is. That's all I gotta say. And this is a peace conference for African nations that speak French that was held in Yaoundé in 2001. What's this guy picking? Oh, it's a coffee plantation, so little beans there, coffee beans. One of the few paved roads in Cameroon. Most of them are dirt roads. They use the CFA franc, as do many other nations in that area in Central Africa. Lots of cotton. Fishing and logging being big industries, and of course, oil. Let's see. A resource map. Plantation agriculture. Here we've got market gardening. Oh, you can't see. Forests. And then, of course, all the oil right there. And lots of gold, too. And this is a more accurate representation of what many of the roads look like. Most towns just have airstrips so that they can get mail and supplies, because cars aren't the most reliable. Here's the port of Douala. And it says here is some tourists exploring the rainforests. Very beautiful. Let's see. It doesn't say what this is for, but let's see. It just says that they're a varied ethnic group. It's a nice picture, though. Population distribution. You can see most people live right there in Douala. Let's see. Doesn't say where this is, it just says that their population is widespread throughout villages. Only 1/2 of the people live in cities. And here's a Bamoun family outside their hut. And here are some Fulani men. and some Bamileke boys in a traditional initiation ceremony. That's interesting. Here is a Baka man, all painted up. And this is just about their languages, but that guy looks really happy to be there. This is supposed to be an example of how French and English sort of get mushed together. How the sign, just kind of skips from like telephone, fax. I guess those are French, but then it's English up there. Baby getting some medicine, very important in some of those rural areas. And there's a doctor. School children looking like they're having a fun lesson. There's Yaoundé University. Look how cool. Let's see. Wish these words weren't here so we could see their faces. It's a ritual that represents a journey to the land of the dead. There's some men praying. Look at this. Isn't that cool? It says some traditional religious groups believe that gods live in rocks and trees. And this is a diviner telling the future by, it says, it doesn't say how he's doing it, but it says they have special powers to communicate with spirits. And here's some Ramadan prayers and some Islamic leaders and a beautiful mosque. Look at that big, beautiful dome and a pretty minaret too. Let's see. There you go. Pope John Paul II visiting Cameroon, and the first Cardinal of Cameroon. They're playing some traditional flutes, it looks like. It doesn't say, but here's another picture of their fantastic masks. That's so amazing. And this is actually a throne. How cool is that? That's awesome. So men talking on their farm. A famous author who, another example of an author who criticized the government and had to live in exile. Some piano, those are the best to play. Of course, soccer is such a big part of daily life in Cameroon. Their soccer team. And this is, forgive me if I say his name wrong, it's Roger Milla, maybe. But it says he's now retired as a footballer and he coaches kids in France. There's a beautiful market, enjoying a meal, and cooking fish in the market. There's something about like flea market food, or what's it, like street food, it just hits different, doesn't it? This is achu, one of the traditional foods in Cameroon. It looks really yummy. A woman in traditional dress doing their hair, beautiful braids. Bamileke village, those awesome looking huts. Those look so neat. And more modern day housing out in the forest. And down here it talks about the village of Tos, which we're actually going to talk about in tomorrow's video, so I won't spoil their secret or their story or anything. Is that the end? Surely not. There's one more page. The busy, busy road. Now that's the end. I love it. That's so neat. So that's the end of our history of Cameroon for the night. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video relaxing and educational. And I hope that you have a very good